The war room of Bastion 7 had never known silence like this. 12 admirals, representing 3 of the galaxy's most powerful species, sat around a massive table carved from polished black stone. No one spoke. No one argued. No one dared break the silence. Because the hologram suspended above the table had already said everything that needed to be said. A colossal warship drifted through the projection. It was so unimaginably large that it eclipsed entire constellations, swallowing the light of distant stars as it moved. Beside it, another image appeared. 2 planets, reduced to expanding clouds of dust and molten debris, not conquered, not occupied, erased. Fleet Admiral Krithos stood at the head of the chamber. His body, formed from living silicon, glowed with the fiery heat of his volcanic homeworld. Cracks of molten light spread across his stone-like skin, and when he finally spoke, his deep voice rolled through the room like distant thunder. The eternal silence. Destroyed Maloney Prime 6 days ago. The hologram shifted. Yesterday, it reduced Vorax Station to atoms. Another image appeared. The enormous vessel was changing course. We have now confirmed its destination. Krithos looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every admiral. It is heading directly for our core systems. A heavy silence followed. Then Admiral Maloney slammed her webbed fist against the stone table with enough force to crack its surface. Her dark blue scales shimmered beneath the holographic light, and the gills along her neck flared with anger. "Then we fight," she declared. "We have always fought." Her voice echoed across the chamber. "The Deathworld Alliance has never bowed to the hegemony. We will not surrender today." Several admirals nodded in agreement, but Krithos remained still. His expression never changed. "I agree," he said quietly. "We will fight." Then his voice grew heavier. "But we must also face the truth." With a gesture of his hand, the hologram expanded. Hundreds of friendly ships appeared. Then the enemy fleet. The difference was horrifying. "Our combined strength is—" He paused. 400 warships. The holographic display highlighted the enemy's formation. Thousands of vessels. Countless escorts. The eternal silence at their center. No one in the room needed to ask the question. They already knew the answer. This would not be a battle for victory. It would be a battle for survival. And deep down, every admiral wondered whether even that was still possible. The eternal silence travels with 200 escort vessels, and the dreadnought itself. He paused, and his glowing eyes dimmed slightly. Our weapons cannot pierce its shields. Our ships cannot survive its main gun. We have run every simulation. We lose. Every time we lose, silence fell again. The Deathworld Alliance had formed 3 centuries ago, when the hegemony had declared all species from high-danger planets to be genetic mistakes. The Krevak, born on volcanic worlds where the ground itself could kill. The Malori evolved in crushing ocean depths where predators hunted in eternal darkness. The Vorax, hardened by radiation and endless desert storms. They had fought together, bled together, and died together for 300 years. And now, it seemed they would finally lose together. There may be another option. Everyone turned to look at Intelligence Officer Shalvek. She was young for a Vorax, her chitin still smooth and unchipped by battle, but her mind was sharper than any blade, and her network of spies reached into every corner of the galaxy. "Speak," Kathos commanded. Shiak stood and touched a control on the table. The hologram changed, showing a spiral arm of the galaxy that most species avoided. "For the past 50 years, my operatives have collected strange reports from this region. Ships that vanish, probes that go silent, and before they disappear, they always send the same message, a warning to stay away from a single star system." "Saul," Malorica said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The Forbidden Zone." "Yes, the hegemony discovered this system 2 centuries ago. They sent a survey fleet of 30 ships. None returned. They sent a battle group of 100 ships. Again, none returned. After that, they simply marked the system as forbidden and never went back. Admiral Vorax Prime clicked his mandibles in confusion. What does this have to do with our situation? If this system is so dangerous, why would we go there? Shaya's compound eyes gleamed. Because my spies have learned what lives there. A species called humans. They evolved on a world that our scientists classify as a Category 9 death world. Gasps echoed around the table. The Krevak homeworld was Category 7. Maloney Prime had been Category 6. Category 9 was supposed to be theoretical. No intelligent species should be able to evolve on such a world. That is impossible, someone said. I thought so too, Shvek admitted. But the evidence is clear. These humans survived on a planet with extreme temperature shifts, constant natural disasters, apex predators in every environment, microscopic organisms that invade and destroy their bodies, and worst of all, each other. Their history is written in blood. They have fought thousands of wars among themselves. They have built weapons capable of destroying their own world multiple times over. And somehow they are still there. Kethos leaned forward. Why have they not expanded into the galaxy? That is the strangest part. They know we exist. They have watched us for decades, but they chose to stay hidden. They quarantined themselves. Why would any species do that? Shove hesitated. According to one intercepted transmission, they believed the galaxy was not ready for them. The room fell silent once more. Each admiral was trying to imagine what kind of species would look at the vast violent galaxy and decide that they were too dangerous for it. This is madness, Malarika finally said. We would be trading one enemy for another. These humans sound like monsters, perhaps. Koss replied slowly. But monsters are exactly what we need. He turned to face the holographic display, watching the massive shape of the eternal silence crawl across the stars toward everything they had built. We are dying slowly but surely. The hegemony is erasing us from existence. If we do nothing different, we will be gone within a year. But if we reach out to these humans, if we can convince them to fight beside us, they might destroy us instead. Malorica argued they might, but the hegemony definitely will. I would rather gamble on uncertainty than accept certain death. F. The vote was close. 6 admirals supported the mission. 5 opposed it. 1 abstained, but it was enough. The Alliance would send an envoy to Earth. 3 days later, the ship Hop's last breath launched from Station Bastion 7. It was a small vessel built for speed rather than combat. Its crew was carefully selected. Captain Thielvos, a Krevak diplomat known for his calm under pressure. Lieutenant Maloney Rash, a translator who spoke 47 languages, and a squad of Vorax warriors, just in case. As the ship entered hyperspace, Captain Thelvos stood alone on the bridge and stared at the swirling lights outside. He had volunteered for this mission because he believed in the Alliance. He believed in the idea that different species could work together, fight together, and survive together. But he was not foolish. He knew that this mission might be his last. The journey took 9 days. 9 days of silence and waiting. 9 days of reading every report about humans that Shvek had provided. The reports were disturbing. Humans were omnivores who ate both plants and animals. They could survive in almost any environment. They healed from wounds that would kill other species. They could keep fighting even when injured, even when exhausted, even when logic said they should stop. But the most disturbing detail was simpler than all of that. Humans formed bonds. They loved their families, their friends, their nations, their ideas. And when those bonds were threatened, they became something else entirely. They became weapons that did not stop until the threat was destroyed, or they were dead. When Hope's last breath finally emerged from hyperspace in the Sol system, Theos felt his heart beating faster. He looked at the view screen and saw nothing. No massive defense platforms, no world-killing weapons, just a yellow star, 8 planets, and a small blue-green world, third from the sun. That cannot be right, Lieutenant Maloney Rash said. Where are their defenses? Thelvos did not answer. He was staring at the blue planet, at the swirls of white cloud and the patches of green and brown. It looked peaceful. It looked harmless. It looked like exactly the kind of world the hegemony conquered without effort, and that somehow made it more terrifying than anything he had ever seen. A communication signal beeped on the console. Someone on Earth had noticed their arrival. Delvo straightened his uniform and prepared to meet the monsters of the Forbidden Zone. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would never be the same. The human ship that came to meet them was small. Captain Thelvos stared at it through the view screen and felt confusion mixing with disappointment. The vessel was barely 200 meters long. Its hull was thick and heavy. Covered in what looked like layers of metal plating, it moved slowly, without grace, like a creature built for survival rather than speed. "This is the species that destroyed a 100 hegemony ships," Lieutenant Maloney Rash whispered. "Their technology looks primitive." Thelvos did not respond. He had learned long ago that appearances could deceive. The communication system crackled, and a voice spoke in perfectly translated Alliance Common Unknown Vessel. "This is the UNS Perseverance. You have entered restricted space. State your purpose or leave immediately." The voice was calm and professional. There was no fear in it, no surprise. Thelvos realized that the humans had known they were coming long before they arrived. "This is Captain Thelvos, of the Deathworld Alliance ship Hope's Last Breath. We come in peace. We seek to speak with your leaders about a matter of great importance." A long pause. Then the voice returned. "Follow us. Do not deviate from the course we set. Do not scan our facilities. Do not attempt any hostile action. If you do any of these things, you will be destroyed." The threat was delivered without emotion, like a simple statement of fact. Thelvos believed it completely. The journey to Earth took 6 hours. During that time, Thelvos noticed things that troubled him. The humans had platforms hidden throughout their system. They were small and well camouflaged, almost invisible to sensors, but they were there. Weapons platforms, observation stations, defense networks that only became visible when you knew to look for them. These humans had been preparing for war for a very long time. When they finally reached Earth, a shuttle carried Thelvos and his team to a station orbiting the planet. There they met Admiral Sarah Chen. She was smaller than Thelvos had expected. Humans were apparently shorter than most species with soft skin and fragile-looking bodies. Admiral Chen had dark hair streaked with gray and lines around her eyes that suggested many years of difficult decisions. She wore a simple uniform with few decorations, and she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Welcome to Seoul," she said. "I am Admiral Chen, commander of the United Nations Space Command. You said you had something important to discuss." Thelvos explained everything. The war with the hegemony, the formation of the Deathworld Alliance, 3 centuries of fighting, and now the eternal silence, a weapon they could not defeat, a threat that would destroy everything they had built. Admiral Chen listened without interrupting. When Theos finished, she simply nodded. "We know about the hegemony. We have been watching them for decades. Then you understand why we need your help." Chen's expression did not change. "I understand what you want, but you do not understand what you are asking for." She gestured for them to follow her. They walked through the station, passing human soldiers and workers who stared at the aliens with curiosity, but not fear. Thelvos noticed that every human they passed carried themselves like a warrior. Even the ones doing simple maintenance work had the eyes of predators. "Your alliance fights the hegemony using standard galactic tactics," Chen said as they walked. "Quick strikes, hit and run, minimize losses, and retreat when the battle turns against you. This is how every species in the galaxy fights. It is the logical approach," Theos replied. "Preserve your forces. Live to fight another day. It is the approach of species that have never truly faced extinction." Chen stopped at a large window overlooking a training area. Below, human soldiers were fighting each other with padded weapons. The combat was brutal and fast. Humans fight differently. We do not retreat when the battle turns. We do not minimize losses. When we commit to a fight, we fight until we win, or until we are all dead. There is no middle ground. Thelvos watched the training below. One soldier fell and was immediately attacked by 2 others instead of surrendering. The fallen soldier grabbed one attacker's leg and pulled them down, continuing to fight from the ground. "Your ships," he said slowly. "They are built so heavily because you expect them to take damage. We expect them to survive damage that would destroy any other vessel. We build redundancy into everything. Backup systems for backup systems. Manual overrides for every automatic function. Our ships are not elegant, but they do not die easily." Chen turned to face him directly, "And neither do we." She led them to another section of the station where a damaged ship was being repaired. Delvos stared at it in horror. The vessel was missing nearly a third of its hull. Scorch marks covered every surface. It should have been scrap metal. "This ship was hit by a hegemony plasma cannon 6 months ago," Chen explained. "The blast killed 40 crew members and destroyed the entire rear section. The remaining crew sealed the breaches, rerouted power from damaged systems, and continued fighting for another 3 hours until reinforcements arrived. They destroyed 2 enemy ships before being rescued." "That is impossible," Maloney Rash said. "No crew could function under such conditions. Human crews can. We train for disaster. We prepare for the worst possible situations, and when those situations happen, we do not panic. We adapt. We overcome. We survive." Thelvos was beginning to understand why the hegemony had declared the Sol system forbidden. These humans were not just warriors, they were something else entirely. Something that did not fit into the neat categories the galaxy used to understand species. "Why did you hide?" he asked suddenly. "With this strength, you could have conquered half the galaxy by now." Chen's expression became sad. "Because we know what we are. We know what happens when humans go to war. We burn everything. We destroy without mercy. We have done it to ourselves many times throughout our history. Billions of our own people killed in wars over land, resources, ideas, religion." She shook her head. "We looked at the galaxy and saw species that fight for territory and power. Normal conflicts with normal rules. We did not want to bring our kind of war to beings who were not prepared for it. But now you are asking us to fight. And if we agree, you need to understand something." Chen stepped closer, and Thielvo saw something ancient and terrible in her eyes. "We will not stop once we commit. We will fight until the hegemony is broken, or we are extinct. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, no peace until one side is completely destroyed." The weight of her words hung in the air. Velvos thought about the eternal silence, about the burning worlds, about the billions already dead. He thought about the Alliance slowly losing a war they could not win. "The hegemony has already decided to destroy us," he said quietly. "They have declared our species to be genetic mistakes. They will not stop until we are gone. Then we have something in common." Chen extended her hand. Theos had learned that this was a human greeting, a sign of trust. "I will bring your request to our leaders. I cannot promise they will agree, but I can promise that if we join this war, the hegemony will learn why the galaxy should have left Earth alone." Delvos took her hand. Her grip was strong, stronger than he expected. 3 days later, Earth voted for war. The United Nations General Assembly had not seen this much agreement in 200 years. Every nation, every faction, every political party voted the same way. The decision was unanimous. Earth would go to war. Admiral Chen watched the final count from her command center on Luna Base. She had expected debate, argument, and delay. Instead, she got unity. The intercepted hegemony communications had made the choice simple. Earth was already on their list of species to be erased. The only question was whether humans would fight now alongside allies or fight later alone. Now it was time to show the galaxy what Earth had been building. Captain Thielvos stood on the observation deck of the Alliance flagship Eternal Flame. He had returned from Earth with news of their agreement. And now the combined Alliance fleet waited at the edge of the Sol system. 400 ships from 3 species, representing the last hope of the Death World Alliance. They had come to collect their new allies and begin the long journey to intercept the Eternal Silence. "How many ships do you think they will bring?" Lieutenant Maloney Rash asked. She stood beside him, her scales reflecting the distant light of Sol. Admiral Chen mentioned that Earth has been building for decades, perhaps 50 ships, maybe 100 if we are fortunate. The words had barely left his mouth when the first human ships began to emerge from hiding. They came from everywhere, from the shadow of Jupiter's moons, from hidden facilities in the asteroid belt, from beneath the surface of Mars, from stations orbiting Neptune and Saturn, and worlds that had no names. Ship after ship after ship, sliding out of concealment like predators emerging from tall grass. Thelvos watched the count on his display climb higher and higher. 100 ships, 200, 300. The number kept rising by the burning mountains. Maloney whispered, "There are so many." When the final ship emerged, the count stood at 847. 847 human warships built in secret, waiting for the day they would be needed. They were not as elegant as Alliance vessels. They were blocky and heavy, covered in armor plating and weapon systems. They looked like fortresses that had learned to fly, and at the center of the formation floated the largest human ship Thelvos had ever seen, the UN's unconquerable will. It was 1.2 kilometers long, nearly half the size of the Eternal Silence. Its hull was scarred and pitted as if it had been dragged through the heart of a star and survived. A communication came through from Admiral Chen. "Death World Alliance Fleet. This is Admiral Chen aboard the Unconquerable Will. We are ready to join your formation. Transmitting coordination protocols now." Admiral Koss, commander of the Alliance forces, responded with a voice that trembled slightly. "Admiral Chen, we were not expecting such numbers. The hegemony has been threatening the galaxy for a long time, Admiral. We have been preparing for just as long. The journey to intercept the Eternal Silence would take 3 weeks. During that time, the human and Alliance crews trained together. The results were sometimes encouraging and sometimes terrifying. Thelvos observed a joint combat exercise between human Marines and Vorax warriors. The Vorax were the finest soldiers in the Alliance. Their Keton armor could stop most weapons. Their reflexes were faster than any other species. They had never lost a ground engagement in 300 years of war. The exercise lasted 4 minutes. The humans won. They fought with a brutality that shocked even the battle-hardened Vorax. They used their environment as a weapon. They worked together with an almost supernatural coordination. And when they were injured, when any other species would have stopped, the humans kept fighting. One Marine continued the exercise with a broken arm, using his injury to distract opponents while his teammates flanked them. Afterward, Thelvos approached the human commander, a woman named Captain Rodriguez. "Your soldiers fight like they have nothing to lose," he said. Rodriguez wiped sweat from her face and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We fight like we have everything to lose. Family, friends, home, everything we love. That is why we do not stop." As the fleet traveled, Theo spent time on the Unconquerable Will. He wanted to understand these strange creatures who had agreed to die for species they had just met. He found them confusing. Human ships had areas dedicated to recreation, games and sports, music and art. Soldiers laughed and told stories between training sessions. They formed friendships with Alliance crew members. They asked questions about other worlds, other cultures, other ways of living. One evening, Thelvos found Admiral Chen alone in an observation lounge, watching the stars pass by. "I do not understand your species," he admitted, sitting beside her. "You prepare for war with the intensity of fanatics. Your ships are built to survive impossible damage. Your soldiers train to fight until death. And yet, you laugh. You play games. You make friends with strangers." Chen was quiet for a moment. "Because war is not all we are. It is something we do when we must, not something we want." She turned to look at him. "Humans have a saying, we fight so that others do not have to. We prepare for the worst because we hope for the best, and we find joy in small moments because we know how quickly everything can end." The hegemony believes that fighting is the natural state of existence. The strong destroy the weak. There is nothing else. The hegemony is wrong. Chen's voice was hard now. Fighting is a tool. It is what you do when talking fails and running is not an option. It should never be the goal. She looked back at the stars. "When this war is over, I hope we never have to fight again. I hope my grandchildren grow up in a galaxy where the hegemony is just a bad memory. That is what we are fighting for. Not glory, not conquest, peace." 2 days before they reached their destination, long-range sensors detected the enemy. The eternal silence was even larger than intelligence had suggested. 3 kilometers of metal and death. Surrounded by 200 escort ships, its main weapon, the silence gun, was visible even from this distance. A barrel that could vaporize moons. Admiral Krithos called a final war council. His voice was heavy with the weight of what was coming. Our scouts have confirmed the enemy position. The hegemony fleet outnumbers us, and the eternal silence outguns us. This will be the most difficult battle any of us has ever faced. Admiral Chen stood beside him. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. The hegemony expects you to fight the way you always fight. Quick strikes and careful retreats. They have built their entire strategy around that assumption. What are you suggesting? Chen smiled. And there was something ancient in that expression. Something that remembered every war humanity had ever fought. I am suggesting that we show them something new, something they have never seen before. She looked around the room at the gathered admirals from 4 species. We show them what happens when Death World species stop being careful. Krithos met her eyes and slowly nodded. All ships prepare for battle. We engage in 6 hours. The fleet moved forward into the darkness toward the enemy that waited, and the hegemony had no idea what was coming. The hegemony fleet moved with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. 200 warships formed a perfect defensive formation around the eternal silence, their weapons charged and ready. Supreme Commander Vexillor watched from the bridge of the Great Dreadnought as the enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace. He counted the ships with cold satisfaction. The Deathworld Alliance had brought everything they had. 400 vessels from those pathetic species that refused to accept their own extinction. And behind them, smaller and stranger ships that his sensors could not immediately identify. Supreme Commander, one of his officers reported. The unknown ships appear to be from the quarantine system, the one designated forbidden. Vexillor laughed. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against stone. The humans? Those primitive creatures? The Alliance must be truly desperate to seek help from such a backward species. He dismissed the concern with a wave of his long fingers. No matter. Today we end this war. All ships engage. The hegemony fleet surged forward. Their weapons were superior. Their shields were stronger. Their crews were trained in tactics that had conquered 1,000 worlds. This battle would be over quickly. At first it seemed that Vexillor was right. The Alliance fleet engaged using their traditional tactics. Quick strikes from Krevak fire ships. Flanking maneuvers from Mallory cruisers. Devastating charges from Vorax assault carriers. They fought with skill and courage, and they drew blood from the hegemony lines. But the hegemony had seen these tactics before. They adapted quickly, closing gaps and returning fire with overwhelming force. Alliance ships began to burn. The mathematics of battle tilted toward the hegemony, just as it always had. On the bridge of the eternal flame, Admiral Krithos watched his fleet dying. "Where are the humans?" he demanded. "Why are they not engaging?" The human fleet had stayed back, watching. 800 ships sitting motionless while their allies fought and died. Then Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. Calm, almost gentle. All Alliance vessels, break off and regroup behind human lines. Human fleet, weapons free, show them what we are. The human ships moved forward. They did not move like any fleet Vexillor had ever seen. There was no careful positioning, no defensive formations. They simply advanced straight into the teeth of the hegemony guns. "They are insane," Vexillor muttered. "Destroy them." Hegemony weapons opened fire. Plasma bolts and missile swarms and energy beams lanced through space, striking the human ships with enough force to crack planets. The first human vessel took 3 direct hits to its forward section. It kept coming. Another ship lost its entire port side to a concentrated barrage. Atmosphere vented into space. Bodies tumbled from the breach. The ship kept coming and firing. Vexillor felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. The human ships absorbed damage that would have destroyed any Alliance vessel. Their heavy armor and redundant systems meant that wounds that should have been fatal were merely painful. And the humans used their dying ships as weapons, positioning crippled vessels to shield functioning ones. charging into enemy lines even as they burned. "They do not retreat," one of his officers said. The fear in her voice was unmistakable. "They do not stop." Small craft launched from the human ships. Boarding pods filled with Marines. They slammed into hegemony vessels, cutting through hulls, disgorging soldiers who fought with weapons and hands and teeth. The hegemony had not faced boarding actions in centuries. They had forgotten how to defend against enemies who wanted to look them in the eyes as they killed them. Ship after ship fell to human assault, not destroyed from a distance, but captured, taken, conquered by soldiers who should have been dead 10 times over, but refused to stop fighting. Vexillor watched his fleet crumble and felt cold terror spreading through his body. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships fall back to the eternal silence. We will end this ourselves." The surviving hegemony vessels retreated behind their ultimate weapon. The eternal silence was 3 kilometers of invincible death. Its shields could withstand anything. Its armor was a meter thick, and the silence gun could destroy anything in a single shot. The human fleet paused its advance. They had taken terrible losses. Nearly 200 ships were gone or crippled. The Alliance had lost another 50, but they had destroyed over 100 hegemony vessels and captured 30 more. Now they faced the real enemy. All ships target the human flagship. Vexillor commanded the unconquerable will. "We destroy their leader, and the rest will fall." The silence gun began to charge. Energy built within its massive barrel, enough power to crack a moon. The human flagship held its position, making no attempt to evade. "Why do they not run?" Vexillor whispered. The gun fired. The beam of pure destruction crossed the void in an instant. It struck the unconquerable wheel directly in its center mass. The ship disappeared in a blinding flash of light. Vexillor waited for the debris, waited for the explosion, waited for confirmation that the human flagship was gone. The light faded. The unconquerable will was still there. Its center section was gone. Nearly 40% of the ship had been vaporized in a single shot. Atmosphere leaked from 100 breaches. Fires burned in every visible section. By every measure, by every calculation, the ship should have been dead. It was still moving forward. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. It was rough with pain, distorted by damage to the transmitters, but still calm, still controlled. "All ships, follow me in." The human fleet surged forward. The Alliance fleet followed. Every vessel, functional or damaged, burning or stable, charged toward the eternal silence with weapons blazing. Vexillor screamed orders. The silence gun could not fire again for another 10 minutes. His remaining escort ships threw themselves at the advancing enemy, dying by the dozens. But there were too many ships, too many enemies who refused to accept that they should already be dead. The unconquerable will reached the eternal silence first. It did not try to destroy the dreadnought from a distance. Instead, it did something that Vexillor had never seen in his entire military career. It rammed. The human flagship crashed into the side of the eternal silence, its armored prow cutting through shields and hull like a blade through flesh. Metal screamed. Fire exploded, and from the wounds of both ships, human Marines began to pour into the greatest warship the galaxy had ever seen. 3 more human vessels followed, crippled destroyers that had no business still functioning. They embedded themselves in the dreadnought's hull like parasites, disgracing soldiers who fought their way into the ship's corridors. Vexillor felt the deck shake beneath his feet. He heard weapons fire in the distance, growing closer. The impossible was happening. Humans were inside his ship, and they were coming for him. Admiral Sarah Chen pulled herself from the wreckage of her command chair. Blood ran down her face from a wound she could not remember receiving. Emergency lights painted everything in red. Sparks fell from damaged systems like burning rain. "Damage report," she said. Her voice was steady despite the pain. Commander Torres answered from somewhere in the smoke. "We have lost 40% of the ship. 2,000 casualties confirmed. Main weapons are offline. Engines are at 15%. Life support is failing in 12 sections. What still works? Forward momentum. And the Marines are asking permission to board." Chen smiled. It hurt, but she smiled anyway. "Permission granted. All hands, prepare for boarding action. We are taking that ship." Across the ruined corridors of the unconquerable will, human soldiers gathered their weapons and moved toward the breach points where their ship had merged with the eternal silence. They were battered and bleeding. Many had broken bones or burn wounds. None of them hesitated. The fighting inside the dreadnought was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. Hegemony soldiers had never faced an enemy at close range. Their tactics were designed for ship-to-ship combat, for the clean mathematics of space warfare. They did not know how to fight creatures who grabbed their weapons and turned them around. They did not know how to handle enemies who used the environment itself as a weapon, pulling down ceiling panels for cover and ripping pipes from walls to use as clubs. The humans adapted to the alien architecture within minutes. They learned the layout by fighting through it. They identified weak points and exploited them without mercy. When they found sealed doors, they cut through them. When they found defended positions, they flanked them or simply charged through with overwhelming violence. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka led a squad through the engineering section. 3 of her soldiers were dead. 2 more were wounded so badly they should have been unable to stand. They kept moving. Contact left. Someone shouted. A group of hegemony guards opened fire from behind a barricade. Tanaka's squad dove for cover. 1 more soldier fell, hit in the chest by a plasma bolt. Tanaka looked at her remaining troops. 5 soldiers, 2 functional weapons. They were outgunned and outnumbered. She grinned. Garcia Davis, suppressing fire. Wong Patel with me. We go over the top. It was insane. It was suicide. It was exactly what humans did. Garcia and Davis opened fire, forcing the hegemony soldiers to keep their heads down. Tanaka and her team sprinted forward, vaulting over debris and crashing into the enemy position. The fight was brutal and fast. Tanaka killed 3 enemies with her sidearm before it was knocked from her hand. She killed a 4th with a piece of broken metal she grabbed from the floor. When the position was clear, she looked at her squad. Wong had a broken arm. Patel was bleeding from a wound in his leg. They were still standing. They were still ready to fight. "Engineering control room is ahead," Tanaka said. "Let us finish this." Admiral Chen led the final assault on the command center. She had refused to stay behind, refused to let others fight while she waited safely. She was human, and humans led from the front. The corridors near the bridge were defended by Vexillar's personal guard, elite soldiers with the best equipment the Hegman could provide. They fought well. They fought bravely. They died anyway. Chen stepped over their bodies and approached the sealed door to the command center. Behind her, 30 Marines prepared breaching charges. "Supreme Commander Vexillar," she said, her voice amplified by external speakers. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Nations Space Command. Your ship is falling. Your fleet is destroyed. Surrender now and your crew will be treated fairly." Silence. Then Vexillar's voice distorted by damage to the internal communications. "Why do you fight so hard? You could have stayed hidden on your little world. You could have lived. Instead, you throw yourselves at us like animals. Why?" Chen considered the question. "Because someone had to. Because the Alliance asked for help, and we could not say no. Because the hegemony would have come for us eventually, and we chose to meet you on our terms instead of yours. You are insane, all of you. Your species is broken. Maybe." Chen nodded to her Marines. "But we are still standing. Can you say the same?" The breaching charges detonated. The door fell. Marines poured into the command center, weapons raised. Vexillar stood alone in the center of the room. His officers had fled or been killed. His guards were dead. His invincible ship was dying around him. He looked at Admiral Chen with something that might have been respect. "What are you?" he asked. Chen walked toward him slowly. She was exhausted. She was in pain. She had lost thousands of people today. But she stood straight, and her voice was clear. "We are humans. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day of our existence. The weather tried to kill us. The animals tried to kill us. The diseases tried to kill us. We even tried to kill ourselves. And somehow, despite everything, we survived. We survived because we learned one simple truth." She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch. "The universe does not care if you are afraid. It will try to kill you whether you fight back or not, so you might as well fight back." Vexillar lowered his head. I surrender. The Battle of Crimson Void ended 6 hours later. The Eternal Silence was captured. Its surviving crew taken prisoner. The hegemony escort fleet was destroyed. The combined human and Alliance forces had won a victory that would change the galaxy forever. 6 months later, the war continued. But everything was different. Human shipyards built new vessels at a pace that amazed even their allies. Human tactics spread throughout the Alliance, teaching species that had fought defensively for centuries to strike with overwhelming force. Human doctors saved soldiers who would have been left for dead under the old ways. Human engineers rebuilt damaged ships that other species would have abandoned. But the greatest change was something harder to measure: hope. The Deathworld Alliance had been fighting for 300 years. They had grown used to losing. They had accepted that extinction was coming. Slowly but surely, they had forgotten what it felt like to believe they could win. Humans reminded them. Captain Thielvos stood on the bridge of his new command, a joint Human Alliance vessel named Unity. Beside him stood Admiral Kethos and Admiral Chen, watching as their combined fleet prepared for another campaign. "Why did you really come to help us?" Delvos asked. He had wondered about this since the first day. "You could have stayed hidden. You could have let us fight alone." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, and there was no violence in the expression, just warmth. "Because being alone is not living. We hid on Earth for decades, watching the galaxy suffer, telling ourselves it was not our problem. But it was our problem. Everything that happens in this universe affects everything else. You were fighting for survival. We had the power to help. What kind of species would we be if we turned away?" Kethos made a sound that might have been a laugh. A smart one, perhaps. A safe one. "Safe and alone." Chen shook her head. "That is not who we want to be. That is not the future we want for our children." She looked out at the fleet, at human and Alliance ships flying together toward another battle. "We want a galaxy where different species can live together in peace. Where strength is used to protect the weak, not destroy them. That is worth fighting for. That is worth dying for." Thevos understood now. The humans were not just warriors. They were not just monsters from a death world. They were people who had looked at a broken galaxy and decided to help fix it. The hegemony had built the Eternal Silence to end the Death World Alliance. Instead, it had woken up Earth, and Earth had reminded the galaxy what it truly meant to survive. Not just to exist, not just to endure, but to fight for something better, to hope for something more, to stand together against the darkness and refuse to fall. The fleet jumped into hyperspace toward the next battle, toward the future they were building together, and somewhere in the halls of Hegemony Command, the rulers who had thought themselves invincible began to feel something they had never known before: fear.